I'm Jack Kupferman, co-chair of the Stakeholder Group on Aging and Chief Catalyst Officer of Grey Panthers, a UN-accredited NGO within the ECOSOC umbrella. So glad that you're joining us for Treasure What You Measure, Older Persons and Data. We're examining not only why robust collection of data and statistics is important, but also to establish new ways to assure that older persons are not invisible in national and local data frameworks. Now, how do we lift the cloak of invisibility regarding older persons? Because there's always competition for attention and resources, reliable and comprehensive data is one important tool to facilitate change. Without good data, creation and implementation of effective policy and programs affecting the lives of older persons is difficult. Even that is not sufficient. Data on older persons must be disaggregated by age. For instance, collection in 5-year bands. The concerns of a 60-year-old are not the same as the concerns of an 80-year-old. Our goal is to assure that data collection policies reflect the reality and scope of the lives of older persons. We hope to inspire you today. Let me give you some context for this effort. Right now, there are approximately 1 billion people over the age of 60. That number will only increase dramatically. Several years ago, the UN Statistical Commission authorized a group of experts and national statistical offices to conduct a 5-year opportunity to improve the quality and standards of data regarding older persons. While that effort was led by the UK Office of National Statistics, it concluded in 2025. All of us know that the task is not complete. We are standing on the shoulders of the Titchfield Group's successes. All of us on this call can find creative solutions to assure that data on older persons are a staple of national and global frameworks. We bring enthusiasm, creativity, and passion for this important effort. Along this route, the upcoming World Data Forum being held in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia in November 2026 is an important opportunity to highlight the way forward on aging statistics and age disaggregated data. In fact, the government of Saudi Arabia has invited us, the Stakeholder Group on Aging, to submit a proposal to host a panel discussion on this topic. We're working on this proposal now. We are thrilled to welcome our panel of distinguished speakers who are experts in this field. They will undoubtedly provide insight, direction, and provocative questions for each of us to ponder. I encourage each of you to look at the run of show document in your chat, giving each panelist a short bio, as well as an understanding of their position and expertise. Clearly, we're lucky to have assembled such a panel. I'm sure you will agree. I also want to acknowledge the people who were instrumental in assuring that this event is a success. Members of the Stakeholder Group on Aging include Rosalind Kahumba, co-chair of the Stakeholder Group on Aging, Sylvia Beals-Gelber, Alejandro Bonilla Garcia, Jeff Rubin, Dr. Jürgen Falk, Kathy Klein, Cynthia Stewin, Emily Trask, Ariana Elazar, Margaret Young, and others. Our goal is not only to educate and inform, but to inspire. Now, let's start the discussion with Alia Mossad, Social Affairs Officer in the Program on Aging section at the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs in New York, who will offer opening remarks. Over to you, Alia.
Thank you, Jack, and good morning or good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. I'd just like to start by thanking the Stakeholder Group on Aging and our co-organizing partners and the speakers that have made today's event possible. So we're starting this off during a very packed high-level political forum week. This year's forum is reviewing progress on Sustainable Development Goals 6, 7, 9, 11, and 17, which is generally speaking focused on water, energy, infrastructure, cities, and partnerships. And we have 36 member states this year that will be bringing their voluntary national reviews to the United Nations over the next week and a half. And every one of those reviews is, in a sense, a portrait that a country portrays of itself, who it is, who it counts, and who it still needs to find. And this is exactly the question behind today's title, Treasure What You Measure. Reliable, accurate, age disaggregated data is not
B
a technical
Jackson and
footnote.
Dublin, Dave.
I think we need to mute somebody. As I was saying, it's not a technical footnote to sustainable development. It's what makes older persons visible in the first place. And as Jack said, as population aging advances in every region, our data systems have to capture not just needs and vulnerabilities, but the roles, the preferences, the contributions, and the rights of older people. And too often, they still don't do that. Older persons remain underreported, they're folded into broader age bands, or they're just simply absent from the evidence that we use to design, finance, and monitor policy. That's not a small gap. It actually weakens accountability and it puts the promise to leave no one behind at real risk. And we at DESA actually have hard evidence of this gap. The Program on Aging recently completed a review of all of the voluntary national reviews that have been submitted since 2016. So that's 358 reports that we looked at. And they mention older persons, but those 350 reports tell a clear story in 5 parts. First, we've found that aging is increasingly visible in SDG reporting, but it's not yet fully integrated. The VNRs over the last decade refer more and more often to older persons and population aging, but those references continue to remain uneven. They're concentrated in some goals and policy areas, but they're nearly absent from others. Secondly, we found that poverty and social protection remain by far the strongest entry point. Goal 1 of the SDGs accounts for about 81% of all of the aging-related references that we found in the VNRs. Older persons are seen again and again through the lens of protection and basic needs, far less often through the lens of participation, autonomy, and contribution. We're really not seeing that. Third, broader policy areas are emerging, but inconsistently. So health, inequality, work, and gender all appear in VNR reporting, yet they're rarely linked in any sustained way to the wider implications of population aging for sustainable development. Fourth, and this is the gap most relevant to the goals that are under review this year, there are several SDG dimensions that remain weakly reflected altogether. So older persons population aging are still, like, you won't see them connected to, for example, lifelong learning, justice, protection from violence and abuse, anything to do with digital transformation, accessible infrastructure, partnerships, climate adaptation, or disaster risk reduction. You never see those connected in the reviews. So put plainly, the goals that decide whether someone can actually age with dignity, such as resilient infrastructure, inclusive cities, functioning partnerships, those are precisely where older persons are the hardest to find in the data. And fifth, the Madrid International Plan of Action on Aging, or MIPA for short, can help fix this. Better use of MIPA can help governments anticipate and adapt to population aging across all of the SDGs and align policies, investments, and services with the demographic realities that they're actually meant to serve. So that 5-part story is precisely the gap this event is here to close. We'll look back at what the Titchfield Group on Aging-related statistics and age disaggregated data accomplished before its mandate concluded. And more importantly, we'll look forward. How do we turn better measurement into better policy? And connect that conversation to the road ahead towards what Jack mentioned, the 6th UN World Data Forum in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia this November, where aging-related data has a real opportunity to move higher on the global data agenda. So as you listen to our panel this morning, I'd ask you to hold on to one thought. Making sure older persons are counted is not an act of charity towards a group at risk. It's a condition for getting the 2030 agenda right for everyone at every age. And that is what evidence-based policy is meant in practice, not policy that simply mentions older persons or adds them as part of a vulnerable group listing, but policy that is actually built on data about their lives. And here's why it matters to every one of us personally. Everyone gets the chance to be young, but not everyone gets to grow old. And that's not a burden to plan around, it's a privilege, and one that is not guaranteed to all of us. So building the data and the policies to match that truth is some of the most important work that we can do. And with that, it's my pleasure to hand it back to Jack for the panel discussion. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Aaliyah. I mean, you're echoing much of what we've been wanting to address here. Data as the basis of good policy. And I just want now, I'm thrilled to be able to introduce Dr. Peter Ochieng from the Director of Social Development and the Head of Senior Citizen Affairs Department in the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection of the Republic of Kenya. I just want to also say thank you to the Republic of Kenya for being a co-sponsor of this event. It makes a great deal of difference to know that we have supporters in all regions of the world that are willing to put their name to the importance of this effort and others. So I'm going to give a brief synopsis of his CV. Dr. Ochieng has represented Kenya and the African Union in regional and international forums, including the expert group meeting in Djibouti and the Second World Summit for Social Development in Doha, Qatar, as well as in regional engagements in Ethiopia. His work focuses on advancing inclusive development, strengthening policy implementation, and promoting rights-based approaches at the national, regional, and global levels. It is truly an honor to welcome Dr. Ochieng, who is not only an expert, but a really good human being. Over to you.
Thank you very much. I thank everybody for this opportunity. And I want to thank the organizers for convening this important discussion. Today's conversation comes at a critical point in our development journey. For Kenya and many African countries across Africa, aging is no longer a future conversation, it is a present development reality. According to the 2019 Kenya Population and Housing Census, Kenya had 2.74 million persons aged 60 years and above, representing approximately 5.8% of the national population. The National Council for Population and Development Report 2025 projects that this population will increase to approximately 3.6 by the end of this year. This democratic transition presents both opportunities and challenges. Older persons continue to contribute significantly as caregivers, farmers, entrepreneurs, custodians of indigenous knowledge, community leaders, and volunteers. Older women in particular make substantial contributions through RAP and paid caregiving across generations, yet these contributions remain largely invisible within the conventional economic and development statistics. It is therefore imperative that our data systems evolve to capture not only the vulnerabilities of the older persons, but also their social and economic contributions. Kenya has made considerable progress in establishing policy and institutional frameworks that support evidence-informed programming for older persons. Article 57 of the Kenyan Constitution obligates the state to ensure that older persons participate fully in society, pursue personal development, live in dignity, and are protected from abuse and neglect. This constitutional commitment is operational through the National Policy on Older Persons and Aging 2018 and the National Social Protection Policy 2023, which provides a rights-based framework for inclusion, participation, access to services, and evidence-informed decision-making. Guided by these commitments, the government of Kenya continues to invest in programs that improve the well-being of older persons. These include expanding social protection programs, strengthening community and family support systems, promoting age-responsive service delivery, enhancing awareness and protection initiatives, improving case management and accountability mechanisms, and strengthening coordination through the Department of Senior Citizens Affairs. At the same time, Kenya is investing in integrated data information system to strengthen evidence generation and improve service delivery. A key innovation is the enhanced single registry, which serves as a consolidated social protection management platform supporting beneficiary and identification, registration, targeting, program management across vulnerable populations, including older persons. By improving multi-sectoral approach across programs and consolidated household-level information, the enhanced single registry enhances transparency, reduces duplication, and strengthens evidence-based decision-making. It also provides us a strong foundation for generating age-disaggregated data, improving program planning, strengthening monitoring and evaluation, accountability, and ensuring that older persons are fully visible within the national development systems. Complementing this effort is the enhanced grievance and case management information system, which strengthens administrative data and demonstrates how digital systems can support responsive service delivery and evidence-based policy. Importantly, during the financial year 2026-2027, Kenya intends to undertake an assessment of the older persons to better understand their demographic trends, needs, and service delivery for policy improvement. This exercise will strengthen planning, improve programming, targeting, and generate evidence to guide future investments across sectors. Reliable aging is a powerful driver to sustainable development. It strengthens accountability and partnership. Under SDG number 17, it informs innovation and age-responsive infrastructure, SDG 9. It identifies barriers to sustainable energy and access, SDG 7, and supports the development of inclusive, safe, and accessible communities, SDG 11. This demonstrates that aging is not simply a social sector, it is a national development issue. Consequently, our statistical system must evolve accordingly. Kenya, therefore, sees four strategic priorities. One, aging must be mainstreamed across all national statistical systems rather than treated as a standalone issue. Household surveys, labor force surveys, health surveys, administrative records, and national census should routinely include meaningful age disaggregated beyond broad age categories. Secondly, stronger institutional collaboration is essential. National statistical offices cannot work in isolation. Effective data ecosystems require partnerships among sectors, ministries, county governments, research institutions, the academia, civil society organizations, development partners, and organizations of older persons. Third, we must invest in evidence that captures not only needs and vulnerabilities, but also capabilities, resilience, and contributions of older persons. Emerging approaches such as Beyond GDP provide an important opportunity to redefine how societies measure progress. Economic growth alone cannot capture well-being, dignity, health, aging, social participation, or resilience. Development indicators should increasingly reflect quality of life across life course. Fourth, older persons themselves must participate in generating evidence that inform decisions affecting their lives. Participatory approach improves both the quality and relevance of data while ensuring that policies reflect lived realities. Globally, inconsistencies in data, in age-disaggregated data and limited compatibility continue to constrain evidence generation. Nationally, administrative systems often operate in silos, limiting interoperability and comprehensive analysis. At the local level, limited digital infrastructure, capacity constraints, and resource limitation continue to affect routine data collection and reporting. Kenya is responding by strengthening administrative database, improving interoperability, expanding digital platforms, and investing in real-time information management. While Titfield City Group made important contributions in advancing global dialogue and aging statistics, responsibility now rests with member states to institutionalize these gains. For Kenya, The way forward lies in integrating aging into broader national development planning and national statistical systems, rather than treating it as a stateless agenda. As we look ahead to the World Data Forum, there is an opportunity to elevate aging as a strategic development priority. We advocate for stronger investment in national statistics capacity, promote harmonized approaches to age disaggregated, and strengthen in administrative systems and ensure age indicators are integrated across sustainable development goals monitoring frameworks. Leadership begins with recognizing that data is not simply about numbers. Data represents people, data represents dignity, data represents rights. As leaders, we must champion investment in statistical systems, promote innovation, strengthen partnerships, and ensure that evidence informs every policy decision affecting older persons. We must also challenge ageism by ensuring our data tells a complete story, not only of need and vulnerability, but also of resilience, productivity, wisdom, and contribution. Kenya remains firmly committed to building an inclusive society where every person is visible within our national and development agenda.
Dr. Peter, your screen has frozen.
Allow me to conclude with this. Okay. Are you now getting me? I was almost concluding.
Yes. Please.
Yes, I was saying, let me finish. The true measure of a society is not only how long people live, but how well they live as they age. If development is truly to leave no one behind, then our data must represent every stage of our life. When older persons are counted, they become visible. When they become visible, they influence decisions. When they influence decisions, societies become more inclusive, resilient, and sustainable. Then we create better policies that benefit not only today's older generations, but every generation that follows. Thank you for listening.
Dr. Ochieng, I want to say thank you so much for that insightful commentary. And for the people on the call, I want you to understand that this is a clear example of how data can improve the lives of older people and how it can be adopted at the national level. Kenya is now a leader in this effort and has been working diligently to assure that the services and rights of older people are more deeply embedded in policies and programs. And that can only happen if we have good data. And that's what Dr. Ochieng has focused on today, for which we're grateful to hear that from you. Now,
thank you.
And again, I want to say thank you for co-sponsoring this event. Our next panelist is Rafael Diaz de Medina, the Chief Statistician for the International Labor Organization and Director of the Department of Statistics at the ILO. He heads the organization's global program on labor statistics and official statistical standards. He oversees ILO-STAT, the ILO's flagship labor statistics database, and supports countries in strengthening statistical systems to produce reliable, internationally comparable data and for evidence-based policymaking and monitoring of the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, I just want to say how fortunate we are to have him joining us today because he has the insight and the actual broad experience of working with member states, not only to assemble data, but to assure that the global frameworks on data are properly used. I just wanted to now, I'm grateful to be able to turn this over to you, Rafael. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack, and thank you, the stakeholder groups on aging, for inviting me and be part of this. I think it's very important in this moment to have a view of how old workers. In my case, of course, I focus on are visible for policies, and of course, as the present speakers were mentioning, it's very clear that without sound data and disaggregated data, we fall into invisibility, and this is the worst scenario that we can have in a collective that is growing, as you mentioned very wisely at the very beginning. It's growing steeply in the world. Life expectancy has grown steeply, and we expect to have aging populations in most of the continents, I would say. So I think I would focus on how we have a particular view. Of course, increasingly, older workers are increasingly participating more in the labor markets. And of course, this provides us an opportunity to see to what extent we can provide member states and constituents, workers, employers, and governments in the world to produce better data to guide sound policies on that. So if you allow me, I will share my screen.
Please do that, please.
Do you see it?
Yes, absolutely, yes.
Okay, so I will try to mention certain things, particularly one of the topics that you mentioned about, which is how the definitions and the harmonizations are also helping in having this group disaggregated in terms of data, how we improve the conceptual foundation of work statistics in order to include categories that usually were not included in the past, but now increasingly countries are producing data, and there we will see how linked with age, population, and how visibility can be taken into policies in order to make them more visible. So what the data shows is, of course, there are deficits, and I will take advantage of some examples of how we can also guide policies through disaggregated data and through, I would say, proper metrics in order to avoid invisibility. First and foremost, of course, is a global population aging. We increasingly labor participation of older workers, it's very clear. And there is a challenge on the labor underutilization, because we take for granted that young population is underutilized, but we also have a huge challenge in the aging population. We can see deficits in quality of employment, not only on quantitative, and there we have one of the important things that it's very important that has been an improvement in how labor statistics focus is also to highlight the unpaid forms of work that we know very well, that is very prevailing in many upper band ages in the labor force. So how the standards help for older workers and market situation? Of course, we require good data. Precisely, we have to focus and refine the way that member states collect the data, produce the data. It's very, I would say, cumbersome for countries to engage in having all the different groups visible and in their sources, say surveys, registries. We have the pension and the social security information, which is very granular. But on the other hand, if we have to also link this to the households where they are coming and the well-being of them, of course, it requires to turn to survey data. Increasingly, we have problems with survey data because there is an increased distrust in national systems. So the non-response is increasing, but there are methods and things that we are doing in order to counterbalance this bad, I would say, trend. What are the standards? The standards are very important because without standards, we don't have disaggregations. And the key pillars for us, for what we call decent work indicators, because it's not only having employment, but also quality of employment and with social protection and with sound social dialogue. The SDG indicators are very, I would say, plentiful in giving us the opportunity to disaggregate data. The whole framework, and we have Francesca here with us, who is one of the mentors of this process, is that we had to produce data disaggregated by age. Age is one of the topics that were, I would say, very important from the very beginning of the process. And it was a long way, because the country had to invest a lot of granularity and methods, invest in improving their service, etc., to have more disaggregation. And there is a trade-off, of course. People tend to think that the labor force it's between 15 and 60 or 62 or 65, but then the rest is not counting, which is not the case now, where we have a lot of indicators that we have tried to also disaggregate by more granular data. So there is a data availability for key labor market informations by age, although, of course, the harmonized age bands, they are still a bit narrow. Yes, we have made efforts to help countries in disaggregate more, but of course the sample size in many aspects conspire against that. But still, we have managed to have harmonized age bands that you see there, from 55 to 59, to 60, 64, 65 and plus. And in ILO-STAT, our database in the ILO, we have over 400 indicators that are disaggregated by age. This is very important, because when we go to the countries and help in labor market information systems, is where ministries of labor, pension organizations, social protection organizations, and ministries of finance, they turn to have in one side all the data. We have made our efforts to have the more disaggregated data by age, precisely to make them more granular and to be more visible. The standards methods for our understanding have helped us. You know, the standard methods in statistics, in labor statistics, we have what we call the International Conference of Labor Statistics. It's the oldest mechanism of setting international statistical standard in the world. We date back to 1923. We started there, and we had more than 100 years doing that. And in the list, it's not the ILO, it's workers, employers, and labor statisticians of the world who are doing this. And they have managed to refine a lot the way that they capture, and they have left the traditional employment and unemployment thing only. And they defined work and employment is one part of the work. It's only for pay and profit. But we have a whole other universe that is unpaid work, that in the case of age workers are very important in that, where they are volunteer work, that unpaid trainee work. This is less important for age population. But then they have a lot of own use production work, for instance, which is very important, and it's also for own production. So this is the unpaid. So we have broadened the scope of work, and producing statistics for all these different categories provide better understanding, because we know that improvements in the measurement of labor underutilization, for example, is crucial. We need unemployment is a very important measure, but it's not the only one. And particularly for this group, it's not the only one. We need to complement with new measures that are precisely focused on underutilization and the potential labor force. Potential because they are not in the labor force, but they are marginally called in the labor force when there are needs. And there is where we have seen in financial crisis, in the COVID, this potential labor force is in, and the age population is particularly vulnerable for that. They are in the margin. In any moment, they can jump in and be willing to accept a job because they need to for their well-being or the household's well-being. So all these, the more relevant for groups, are likely to be less explicit in forms of labor underutilization. And for us, it's very important. Particularly, let me share this interesting thing. The aging, it's very important. It's a global trend. While Africa is the less affected, I would say that still in many African countries, we are showing a growing aging population, although, of course, the other Europe, Asia, Latin America is steeply aging. But for that, we also see that there is an increase in the retirement age and the senior labor force participation. The life expectancy is growing, it's been extended, and the labor force participation is being extended. And if you see this graph, you see the slope that is increasingly, it's a bit increasing, and particularly the blue one, this one, is really, we have seen a trend. It's very slight, but it's a trend, and in many aspects, in many countries, it shows the importance. We have data that is very shocking, no? For instance, who are receiving a pension if they are retired? Okay, above retirement, there are almost 80% of the world are people below retirement age receiving a pension. But if you see, most of them are coming from high-income countries. But the low-income countries, we have only 13% of this age population that receives a pension. So what is the problem? How this population can be treated in policies? The same, the labor dependency policy, the ratio, the non-working age population or working age people not in employment or employed. This per employed person is very important for many policy areas. So we show that labor underutilization of older workers it's really unemployment is very low, but underutilization is not so low. So they are more exposed to other forms of labor underutilization. And when they are employed, they struggle more than the young workers. So when it takes longer to get a job when you are 60 or 65 and above. And this is clearly a very important aspect for policies when the countries are increasingly seeing age population and increasingly seeing the damaging on social protection regimes who used to be the safeguards for these groups, and now they don't know. They don't have that. In many countries, there is a really crisis in this. And there we have interesting information that reveals the underutilization. It's not only unemployment rate, that of course is 65 and above, it's lower, but you have a very important labor utilization underutilization rate and unemployment and potential labor force rate. What this shows, that quality of employment is also very important. Older workers are greatly exposed to the informal economy, for instance, more than the average. And although we can also see that compared with the younger generations, now they are a bit, if you see in an aggregated way, it's privileged in terms of income and seniority. They could manage more things in their lives that there is now expected from the younger generations, and this is revealed even in opinion polls, etc. of I would say negativity. So there are a lot of missing data still, and I think this effort on the World Data Forum and to raise awareness and all that we can do in terms of the stakeholders group on nations to promote more data on that and more granular data, it's very welcome. We need to have data on unpaid care work, which is very important. Volunteer work, we have partnered with UN volunteers to work actively on that, but still a long to go. And of course, then the other things, you know, that aged population in rural areas is mostly devoted to subsistence, foodstuff production. And we need to be more accurate in measuring, at least from the country. So really, with this, I finished, but I wanted to just to give you some reference to materials that you can see from the how labor statistics is incorporating aging in their discussions, and particularly also highlighting how labor market information systems are very keen in including this type of disaggregations for policies, and particularly for social protection, for benefits, and for studying, for focusing on the well-being of the population. And this is what we are seeing in different countries. We have more than 70 countries that are involved with the labor market information systems in some way. 30 countries are really leading, I would say, and most of them in the developing world. And all this, it's very revealing when you work with them that aging is one of the topics that ministries and civil society within the ministries are taking forward. So thank you with this, and I look forward to the interaction afterwards. Thank you.
Rafael, thank you so much. Your comments and analysis are real highlight the importance not only of the development of aging statistics and age disaggregated data, but they clearly show the link between data and change, between data and programs, between data and moving any agenda forward, and that we as the globe have not really taken advantage of the contributions of older people, or the anticipated contributions of older people, because those things have been invisible. We are looking forward to working with you, and your highlighting of just the simple thing of labor statistics. It's not simple, makes a big difference. So again, we're really grateful for your clear understanding and presentation. Thank you so much for that. Now, we're going to turn now to Francesca Perucci, the Director of Policy and Partnerships at Open Data Watch. An expert on development data, she began her career in...
Pas besoin de prendre une veste,
Excuse me?
je pense. Si.
Donatella, can you please turn your... Thank you. She began her career in the UN in gender and social statistics, and held various key positions until she became assistant director of the United Nations Statistics Division, where she led, among other things, the development of the SDG indicated framework. Throughout her career, she has been a trailblazer in innovating data tools, focusing on data as a powerful tool for development. Her influential contributions extend to shaping global data initiatives and advocating for better development data and stronger inclusive data systems. I'm happy to say the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Jack, and thank you to the Stakeholder Group on Aging for this opportunity. Really, this is a great conversation. I think we heard the argument for data on older persons is very strong. Certainly, population aging is one of the most significant demographic transformations of our time. As you said, Jack, the UN Population Division estimates that in 2024, there were 857 million people worldwide, 65 and older. And this is expected to double by 2050, which means 1 in 6 people globally will be 65 and older. We also know that women live longer than men, which of course means that older women make up a growing share of the older population, which has important implications for health, social protection, care systems, but overall for gender equality. And we generally focus, rightly so, on maximizing the benefits of the demographic dividend through investments in health, education, employment for the younger generations. And those, of course, those investments are essential, but we should also place the contributions and the experiences and the needs of those close to 1 billion older people now at the center, living today, alive today, at the center of development policies and programs. And so we need better data. But we've heard, I think all the previous speakers highlighted the significant gaps when it comes to aging and the older persons. One key lessons we learned is that improving data on older persons requires more than simply disaggregating existing indicators by age. And I say that as one of those people who are advocating for having SDG indicators disaggregated by age. I think age disaggregation remains important, but it's not absolutely not enough. We need indicators that specifically capture issues affecting older persons. And those are across a wide range of policy areas: health, social protection, employment, care, housing, digital inclusion. So within the SDG framework, there has been a lot of focus on improving disaggregation. But more recently, the attention has shifted towards building more inclusive data systems and taking an intersectional approach. And I believe this is the right direction. And that's what I want to talk about. Inclusive data systems are designed from the outset to represent everyone, including older persons, rather than attempting to fill gaps and to disaggregate after the data programs have been designed and the data have been collected. Also, older persons are not a homogeneous group. And I'm not talking about the age brackets. I'm talking about the fact that their experience is different depending on gender, disability, income, location, and many other factors. This is why the intersectional approach is so important. Now, how do we implement data intersectionality? Of course, we require multiple data sources and we need integration. Household surveys, although there are limitations, and we've heard from Rafael the challenges household surveys face today in terms of low response rate and all other constraints, financing constraints, etc. But they remain a key source of information for data intersectionality. But to be inclusive, they really require adaptation, improving sampling strategies, refining question design, accounting for differences within the household. Also, older persons are frequently underrepresented in surveys or excluded by design. Second data source that I want to highlight is administrative data. And again, we've heard about that, the importance of really leveraging data that come from health, pensions, social protection systems. They have an enormous potential, but they're still largely underutilized for statistical purposes. Citizen data. Citizen data is uniquely positioned to advance intersectionality in data systems. They reveal issues that official statistics may miss, such as social isolations, barriers to services, the lived experiences of aging. It also allows the full participation of the organizations representing older persons throughout the data value chain. That's a key aspect of citizen data, the full engagement of those for which those data are relevant throughout the data value chain, which leads to more relevant and more trusted data. Integration of qualitative data. Again, that's largely underutilized, but it's such an important component of data intersectionality and can really help shed light on so many aspects of the lived experiences of older people. And finally, of course, as Peter mentioned, improving interoperability. That's key. We need to integrate data sources and we need to improve interoperability tools to do so. Now, there's a lot, but there is a strong foundation, I think, on which we can build. The Collaborative on Citizen Data now has over 2,000 members and has developed tools and guidance for the ethical and responsible production and use of citizen data, a guide on intersectionality, including data sources to be used to inform intersectional data analysis. Open Data Watch has developed an intersectional framework for data that provides guidance on how to translate the intersectionality concepts into practical steps with regards to data. The work is led by a steering committee on intersectionality in development data that brings together experts from the various groups that are often underrepresented in data. And we have produced publications, resources, country case studies, a report on disability data, a report on LGBTQI plus inclusion, and the forthcoming one is on older persons. So again, a useful resources that I hope can really inform these discussions as we move forward. Another tool that I want to mention is the Open Data Watch Inclusive Data Compass. We're trying to assess the data availability and openness on specific population groups, including older persons, country by country. And we hope that that will help us advocate and give a tool to countries and to those groups and organizations involved with data production and in data improvement, a tool to really understand where the priorities are, what is missing, and what data sources we can leverage. And we'll also assess the enabling environment, trying to understand, the characteristics and the conditions that make, within countries that make the production possible and the use of this data possible. So looking ahead, I would like to highlight 5 priorities. First, we need greater investments in household surveys, focusing on individuals and capturing the experiences of all household members. And we need to make sure that we extend the coverage to all the age groups. Far too often, countries are still dependent on donor-driven, donor-funded surveys with a strong focus on children, women of reproductive age, or in general, working age populations. Second, we need to engage very actively in discussions, and they're already starting on the Beyond 2030 agenda to ensure inclusive data remains central to discussions for the development of for the preparation of the next development and monitoring framework. And I'm not talking simply about indicators. I'm talking about really making inclusive data central to the development agenda. Third, it's been mentioned already, leverage the administrative data sources. And again, there are existing mechanisms and networks, including the collaboration on administrative, the collaborative on administrative data that is really can offer that space. And we should create a group to look in particular at best practices and to offer technical guidance on how to better use administrative data sources for older persons. Fourth, again, as we mentioned, the UN World Data Forum. We can use that to help build momentum by promoting those conversations in panels, in overall discussions. But I also would encourage commitments through the initiative of the Commit to Data initiative, where we can get visibility and engage more broadly with other partners. Finally, the momentum created by the Tichfield City Group, the UN Statistical Commission, in the field of aging-related data has been important and, of course, provides strong foundations. But I feel like there's still a need for stronger coordination, and I see a lot of fragmentation across initiatives and sectors. And we don't have an agency on older people, right? We have agencies that specialize on so many other sectors, but we don't have an agency on older people. So it's terribly important that we use existing mechanisms to really create that strong network, and we really need to bring all these efforts together. So especially now that the Tichfield Group has concluded its mandate, it's important to have these other groups and mechanisms to continue to advance the agenda. And I think the ones I mentioned so far could be the right space, like the collaborative on citizen data, the intersectionality for development data, organized by Open Data Watch, the collaborative on administrative data, the data forum, of course, the Commit to Data. Those are very important tools that we can leverage, and we can really get the visibility we need to advance the agenda. And I'll stop here. Thank you so much again, Jack.
Francesca, thank you so much for these concrete suggestions and underlying how the work of A, our work is not done, and B, how it has usually been an invisible problem that is beginning to be, the veil is being lifted, and it all needs to be part of a whole, and you are identifying important components of that whole. Rakesh, can you please mute yourself? And we're grateful for that kind of insightful commentary. Now, I also wanted to, I'd love to move on to our presenter, Kristen Jeffers, Associate Population Affairs Officer in the Population Unit of the UN Economic Commission for Europe. With a background in demography and statistics, her professional experience is always involved in one way or another the harmonization, dissemination, and analysis of population data. Her current role with the ECE to support implementation of the Madrid International Plan of Action on Aging in the UN ECE region includes leading and contributing to initiatives that strengthen the availability, quality, and use of aging statistics for research and policy. And before I turn it over to her, I want to remind us that this forum that we're having here, much of that is technical and detailed, but we can all see the link between the behind the scenes work and the results that we want to find for not only for older people, but for people generally. And I'm grateful that we're having this conversation so people understand that there's so much behind what you see at the visible level. Now, Kristen, turning the floor over to you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, colleagues. Thank you very much to the Stakeholder Group on Aging and to Jack and his colleagues at Grey Panthers NYC for organizing this important event and for inviting me to participate. As Jack said, my name is Kristen Jeffers, and I represent the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, or UNECE, and its Standing Working Group on Aging, which brings together governments across the region to address population aging and to support the implementation of MIPA and other international and regional commitments on aging and older persons. UNECE is also the birthplace of the fundamental principles of official statistics, which emphasize the importance of impartiality in statistical systems. So I hope my colleagues in the statistics division will forgive me for beginning my intervention by saying that improving data and statistics on older persons is fundamentally a political issue. At its core, improving age disaggregated and aging-related data requires political commitment. When governments recognize aging as a priority, they are more likely to build the strong mandates and invest in the statistical infrastructure needed to understand the situations of older persons and to design effective policies. And this is particularly important in the UNECE region, which is at the forefront of global population aging. Today, nearly 1 in 5 people in our region is over the age of 65. By 2050, that figure is expected to rise to 1 in 4, and the population aged 80 and older is growing even faster. And because of these demographic trends, aging probably receives more political attention in our region compared to other world regions, but still we face significant gaps in the availability, quality, comparability, and accessibility of data on older persons. And these gaps make it harder to develop evidence-based policies and to monitor whether commitments are being fulfilled. Last year, the Conference of European Statisticians conducted an in-depth review of aging-related statistics across the UNECE region. The review examined what data are available, where the gaps remain, and what can be done to improve the situation. And the review identified 5 major challenges, many of which have already been mentioned by my co-panelists, which I think really shows that these are the main challenges, not only in the UNECE region, but also around the world. First, age disaggregation remains inadequate. In many data sets, everyone over the age of 60 or 65 is still grouped together as a single category. And this approach no longer reflects the reality of older people's lives. Like Jack said in his opening remarks, people in their 60s, 70s, 80s, and beyond can have very different experiences, opportunities, and needs. And as Francesca said, older persons are far from a homogeneous group. To understand inequalities and unique needs, we need data that are disaggregated not only by age, but by other characteristics, including sex, disability, ethnicity, living arrangements, among others. Second, survey limitations make it difficult to measure many aspects of aging. Many aging-related indicators rely on national surveys, but sample sizes for older persons, especially the oldest old, are often too small to support meaningful analysis or multidimensional disaggregation. And there are also important blind spots in surveys. Surveys often focus on private households and therefore miss older persons living in care facilities. And some surveys collect information from only the household head, which can obscure the experiences of older people living in multi-generational households. Third, as Raphael mentioned, there are still conceptual gaps. We do not have a universally agreed framework for aging-related statistics. As a result, data remain limited in areas that matter greatly for the well-being of older persons. Examples include discrimination, abuse and neglect, mental well-being, informal caregiving, access to health and long-term care, age-friendly environments, and intergenerational support. In many cases, policymakers simply do not have the information they need. Fourth, data needs are evolving. As societies change, new policy questions emerge. For example, we know that both climate change and digitalization affect older persons in specific ways, yet the evidence base in these areas remain very limited, making it difficult to design effective responses. And fifth, data are often fragmented and difficult to access. Information relevant to aging is collected by many different ministries, agencies, and institutions. Bringing together these pieces into a coherent picture can be challenging. Yet this is essential for accountability. If we cannot clearly see the situation of older persons, it becomes much harder to assess whether policies are working and whether commitments are being met. So what can we do? And here I would like to highlight two important principles. First, we must recognize the realities facing national statistical systems. Resources are limited and demands are constantly growing. So we cannot assume that every gap can be solved through new surveys or new data collection efforts. Instead, we should make better and more creative use of the data that already exists, including administrative data. Second, we need stronger dialogue between those who produce statistics and those who use them. Too often, policymakers, researchers, civil society organizations, and statistical offices work separately. Bringing these groups together helps ensure that data production responds to real policy needs and that existing data are fully utilized. And these two ideas are reflected in UNECE's ongoing work to strengthen aging-related statistics and data on older persons. One important initiative is the development of a framework of statistical indicators for monitoring aging policies. This work is being carried out jointly by the Standing Working Group on Aging and the Conference of European Statisticians, bringing together data users and data producers to identify practical and relevant indicators based largely on data that are already available. At UNECE, we have also developed an aging data assessment tool to support countries in identifying their data gaps and needs. This tool brings together policymakers and statisticians within a country to review available information, identify missing data, and develop recommendations for improvement, while making the best possible use of existing national data sources. So let me conclude by returning to my opening point. Improving data on aging begins with changing the narrative around aging itself. Population aging and the rights and well-being of older persons should not be viewed as a narrow sectoral issue. It is a major social and economic transformation that affects every area of sustainable development. To respond effectively, we need evidence. Without robust, accessible, and disaggregated data, older persons and the realities of their lives remain invisible in policymaking. But when we invest in stronger aging-related data systems, we create the foundation for better policies, better accountability, and better outcomes. Most importantly, we help ensure that every older person is seen, heard, and counted. Thank you very much for your attention.
Fantastic. Fantastic, Kristen. That's a beautiful kind of summary, and it also ends up being a call to action. Now, I'm grateful. I would like to open up the floor to people who have a question, and then I'll make some concluding remarks. Hopefully that we have been able to not only educate, but inspire people to understand what the importance of this topic is and how we might be able to move forward. VJ, did you have a question?
Yeah, it's not a question actually, it's a comment which I want to share with you. A question has been upon the sustainability of old age pensions. The debate, the discussion is on at the moment in Mauritius around the budget, which has, where the Minister of Finance has decided that there be a kind of means test. But there has been pressure from trade unions, pressure from the civil society to review the strategy of government. And yesterday, even the government has decided to remove that means test. Now, my question is, how do we sustain old age pension, especially in a developing country, if the economy is not strengthened through, through productivity? How do we sustain an old age pension for? Let's say we have 275,000 people from the age of 65 to over, out of 1.2 million. Yeah.
So, thank you. Thank you so much, VJ. Obviously, this is, we're going to, you know who we're going to ask the response from. Raphael, can you take that one?
That's right. Thank you.
Yes, maybe. Well, this is from the data perspective. I think well, the first thing is to make this possible to identify, because we were blind long ago when we didn't have the data to respond to this kind of policy questions. In terms of how we cope and how we do that, of course, it means how we structure our social protection institutions at the country level, and how we really find a way. And we have here Alejandro, who knows very well about the topic. And of course, this is, it's an actuarial issue that we have in this, and all pension institutions are trying hard to be innovative in trying to cope with these possible mechanisms of funding, because how we are dealing with this type of challenges when we have shrinking budgets in many countries, and when we have, of course, an extended life that we pose as a great pressure on social protection systems, and how this dependency rate is, of course, very crucial as an indicator. And this, of course, each country has their own possibilities. There are countries that really are not addressing this, and it's a time bomb because it's a demographic bomb that they are having, while others are struggling to see how they lower it. Unfortunately, this has been revealing in lowering the benefits for the actual retired people, and liquefying a bit the deficits that they are saying. But then it's the role of the state, and of course it depends on the country what type of arrangement they can have. There are countries that are very keen on keep this as a priority in supporting their age population, and they made their efforts, but struggling as well with competing aspects now with defense in many countries. While in others are less, I would say, unfortunately, less prone to have sound social protection systems that can, because this is not only a one-time investment. It's a long process where you need to rethink the system in order to cope with this. Unfortunately, there are a lot of competing crises now in the world that they are not allowing a proper.
So thank you so much, Raphael. And yeah, it's pretty obvious there are a lot of competing priorities, and we're here to make sure that the concerns of older people are not ignored. And as I had indicated before, so that data is an important tool for that. It's not the only tool, but it is an important tool. Without it, we're not going to be able to do what we need to do. Are there a couple of other questions? If I hope that I say the name correctly, Aludare, please ask.
Yeah. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. My name is Oludare Oluwole. I really find this discussion very, very deep because here in Nigeria, we don't really have data for other people. Other people need to be infeasible. But the question I want to ask is this, that most of our programs and policies by Nigerian governments are being assisted by technical input from developmental partners like United Nations agencies and organizations. Why is it so difficult for them to really encourage Nigerian government to add the inclusion of other people in their data and statistics? Because
Oh,
other people are so invisible in Nigeria and something needs to be done about it.
so
That's my question.
here's, did you have a specific person that you wanted to address that question to? But I do have a general comment on that. I, we would
I
encourage,
want
we would encourage you to work with us on the issue of data and older people as we possibly move forward towards an event or two at the World Data Forum. So, the issue of Nigeria, as you know, you have one of the strongest advocates for older people, and that's Omakaro in Nigeria, whom I love dearly. And, she is also aware of the importance of data with regard to older people. So I wanted to move forward again. Anne Montgomery.
Yes, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I love that. I work at the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare here in Washington, D.C., so I think about these issues quite a lot. And it seems as though I'm an example of it. People who are older are now working longer. The data certainly show that. But we have a lot of ageism, built into our cultural societies and our employer societies and sectors. So I'm wondering if we are thinking about data collection through that lens so that if people who choose to work longer and can work longer wish to do so, then how do we remove some of the ageism barriers?
That is the big question. Would anybody like to tackle that one in a short few sentences?
I can try, Jack, just by saying I think coming back to my point about changing the narrative on aging generally, I think that's where the link is here, possibly that if we can change the narrative on aging, which includes addressing ageism in media, in policy making, I think we can help to shift the perspective on older workers and longer working lives and raise it on the political priority agenda list, which would then help to generate more data on the topic. I don't know. I suppose I shouldn't have jumped in before allowing Raphael to talk about older workers. Excuse me. Thanks.
I'm also mindful that there are a number of other people who have questions, and I want to get to as many of them as possible before we conclude. Jeff, can we ask you for your question, your brief question?
Yes, and in terms of talking about elder employment, I was thinking along the lines of caregivers. Healthcare is a major concern in just about every country. And if it wasn't for here in the US, caregivers, older caregivers and family caregivers, the cost would be astronomical. What is being done to collect data on the value of older adults in addressing healthcare issues?
I'm going to take a stab at that at the broad brush. There's numerous issues at the global level with regard to care generally. And caregiving takes three or a number of different forms. One of them is family caregiving, the other is residential caregiving, and community caregiving. There's a lot of innovation that's being done. The collection of data on that is globally not adequate. And I'll also remind people that within the Sustainable Development Goals, under Goal 5, gender, there's there's a target about dealing with caregiving at a general level. So that what you're talking about, Jeff, has to be on the agenda of global data collection and use of that so that every country can have a better understanding of where the gaps are. Thank you. Ms. Shirley?
Greetings, everyone. I am going to piggyback off of Jeff's question. Are there data sources available concerning care in adult care facilities? And I'm interested particularly in from the U.S. context.
I'm going to run that over to Ann Montgomery. Are you aware?
I'm not aware of data collected in residential facilities, nursing homes, assisted living on caregiving. I do think it's important that we look at that. There is good caregiving data collected by AARP, generally speaking, on the value of unpaid care, of caregiving, and they put that out every year, and it's a very substantial figure, which I think Jeff might have been alluding to and some of the speakers. But I don't know that we've captured data on the extent of caregiving in the residential long-term care sector.
Thank you. Let's move on to Sylvia.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for a terrific panel. All of you have been amazing. We treasure what we measure. If we know that data is at the heart of how we consider visibility. So thank you so much. I want to pick up four things which have been said by Alie, by you, Francesca, by all of you actually, and also Kirsten. We have next steps to think about. There is a MIPA review coming up next year. There's a post-Doha implementation process, which has aging very clearly in it, as well as important issues of care, social protection, leave no one behind, find no one behind. Beyond 2030, how do we position this issue? And the Beyond GDP agenda, which is coming up with the high-level panel, and in particular in UNECE, I was present in Geneva. There was a very important panel. I want to ask the panelists to advise and to guide us, those of us who work on aging, how best we work together. Yes, we have the data forum, but we have these four issues coming up in 2027. How do we best work together so that we make sure we don't lose the opportunity while addressing the challenge, but come up with something really integrated and cohesive, as you talked about, Francesca? Thank you. It's a big question, but that's my question.
Sylvia, I'm going to say that is the challenge that we're going to address next, with the goal of making a big splash and impact at the World Data Forum. So we will be able to work together on these things to move forward. We don't have that much time. As a matter of fact, we are kind of over time. So I think the last person is Zacchaeus. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. Please take the floor.
Jack.
Yeah, Alejandro. Okay.
Jack, yes, thank you. Thank you. Just a very quick reminder, which is a very important date. Next Monday, we'll start the discussions on the drafting of the Convention on the Rights of Older Persons. And data should be in one of the elements that would be considered. Before going to Saudi Arabia, I think we have to put a step before in Geneva next week and include data as an element, and it's a crucial element to design policies and strategies. Just that, thank you, Jack.
Thank you for that excellent suggestion and connection. That's something that we'll be able to talk about like in the next couple of days. I think that we have had a really important, I hope we've had a really important discussion here, and that we have enlightened everybody on this call, not only about the importance of data with regard to older people, but the challenges in making sure that it becomes an embedded reality in all national and regional, national, and local statistical systems. Again, I wanted to say thank you for everybody who helped put this great panel discussion together. I'd mentioned all their names earlier, and I'm just grateful that we've been able to make this happen. I think that we're good for the moment. Thank you, everybody, for attending, and I hope that you found it enlightening.
Bravo, Jack.
All right, people.